black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Going to be talking to Anthony. And imagine for the moment you're out in the woods, you don't really believe in Bigfoot, and you come across something that shouldn't exist, and you feel like you're in dreamland. You feel like you're either going nuts or this isn't real, this doesn't belong. And that's what happened to my guest tonight, Anthony. He came across something very strange and odd in the forest. And he went home, decided to come back. I think it was about a week later, and things got even more and more strange. And I always enjoy encounters like this. I've heard I've probably heard a handful of them off the air, but never on the air. So I really want to thank Anthony for coming on tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. I have some merchandise up there. You can become a member and get additional shows. A lot of cool things on the website. If you get a chance, I hope you check it out, sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Anthony to the show. Thanks for coming on, Anthony. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here. Turned into a faithful listener to the show over the past few months.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I know you had a very strange encounter, and it got stranger. But let's kind of start from the beginning. If you would, for the audience, just kind of start from the beginning. Tell us what you were out doing, and just kind of walk us into what happened. What did you see?
Okay. Well, actually, my first encounter happened. This was in 2004, and we were on I live in we'll say Central Kentucky, and I was heading home from one of the major cities here, and on the way home, I had a little Chevy Trailblazer, and I was driving, and one of the lug nuts broke on it. And as I get going down the road again, a couple more of them break. So, I decided, I have my pregnant wife in the vehicle with me. I said, I'm gonna slow down. So I'm going like, I went a total of 30 miles, and it took me like almost 3 hours to get there. As we're passing through, probably about a quarter mile away from where this incident happened, we had the windows down, and it was pretty chilly that night. And often there's a dry creek bed that was running alongside the road. It sounded like a bulldozer running through the trees. And I mean, it really, really, really freaked me out. And I've never in a million years thought that if somebody said, "Hey, there's a Bigfoot over there," I'd have been like, "Man, you're out of your mind."
Yeah.
It's about like the story I'm about to tell you. I mean, if I wasn't there, I wouldn't believe it. I mean, if somebody was to tell me this story and I didn't know what I know, I would be like, man, this person really needs to be checked into a mental hospital. But my first encounter is there's this, it's a abandoned rock quarry, and it has a really good size, actually, I call it a glorified pond, and everybody else would probably call it a lake. It's pretty good size, and you know, when I would ride my motorcycle, I loved going out there because it was absolutely quiet. It was peaceful. It was somewhere to go, you know, just to clear my thoughts. And another thing about it is while I was out there, you know, there was a little bit of strangeness in there. I never really thought about. I couldn't say that I was actually being, you know, felt somebody staring at me, as people would say. I never felt that way, but it was just it was kind of an eerie feeling, but it was also a tranquil feeling. So pretty much, you know, if I took a long ride, I would always go back and stop at this lake and, you know, sit out there and smoke cigarettes, you know, collect my thoughts. Well, one day I was out there, and this was probably in, I can't remember. It was one of the summer months. It was probably June or July, August, one of the months. And it was in July is when it was. I was sitting there on the bank one day, and there's an abandoned building that sits there, and, you know, I walking in, and it was always really stinky in there. I mean, really, really stinky. And I thought it was, you know, there might have been a dead deer in there or something. But, you know, I'm sitting on the bank next to this building, and I heard like, it's like almost sound like a tree, like a snapping of a tree, like a branch or something. The next thing I hear is, sounds like a kid crying, like a baby crying. And I'm sitting there, you know, I'm like, man, you know, this is, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I'm hearing this. So curiosity gets the best of me, and I'll go over there, and, you know, I'm walking through I was probably maybe about 300 foot away from my bike at the time. And it's a pretty wooded area. And, you know, I get to walking through there, and you know, it keeps getting louder. And when I walked up on it, and when I seen it, I thought it was like maybe a baby bear, you know, a cub that was caught in this tree. But it looked like a big cub. But as I got up on it, I realized that's not what it was. And it turns around and looks at me, and it looked like a kid, like a child, a baby. It looked like a part chimp. And, you know, I'm standing there looking at this, and I'm like, you know, what am I looking at? And it's the wildest thing in the world. I never, you know, ever heard nothing about Bigfoot growing up. I probably seen Harry and the Hendersons, but it was the last thing that was in my mind. I'm sitting there looking at this, and I look, and the creature, the animal, I call them animals, was upside down and had his leg caught like in the Y part of the tree. And it's squalling and going crazy, and it looks at me, and I mean, the look on his face, it really wasn't a look of fear. It was a look of pain. I could tell it was in pain. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, should I try to help this out? I didn't know what it was. Will it hurt me? And so I'm sitting there debating on this, and all of a sudden, the baby, we'll call it the baby stops crying and just stares off, and this whole demeanor on his face changed. Well, I looked to see where he's looking at, and there's another one. Only she's a lot taller. I'm 6'2", and she probably had 4 or 5 inches on me, so I put her at about 6.5 foot. I'm sitting there staring at that one, you know, I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. All of a sudden, another one comes from behind the tree, and they're both females. And the reason I know they were females is because, you know, they had breasts. They were hairy, but you could tell what they were. And I'm sitting here, and I'm looking at the two big ones. I'm looking at the baby, and the other one that stepped out from behind the tree must have been its mother, and she was every bit of 8 foot tall. And she wasn't big. She wasn't, you know, like the patty type, I guess they would call it. She was more slender. And she looks at me, and she growls and yells. I mean, loud, extremely loud. So I get scared, and I run back, and I get on my motorcycle, and I haul ass. Well, that same night, you know, I'm at home, and, you know, I'm feeling weirded out about this, and it was kind of hard to collect my thoughts on what I had just seen. The next day, I'm supposed to get up and go to work, and for some reason, I ended up getting sick. And I was sick for like 3 or 4 days straight, and it was not like a flu sickness. It was more of I felt like I had a hangover and like I'd been punched in my head a few times.
Yeah, kind of like you've been poisoned.
Yeah, like I'd been poisoned. And I don't know if that's what they call the infrasound, whatever that was. I ended up taking the next couple of weeks off of work, and because I didn't know what had happened. And during this 2-week period, I ended up talking. I talked to my grandfather. He's the only person that I had told about it at this time, and he believed me. And he told me, you gotta, because I told him I was scared about it. He was like, you have to face your fears. And I'm sitting there thinking, maybe did I have a mental breakdown out there and really didn't see this stuff? So I'll go back out there probably about 3 weeks to a month later.
Well, before we go into that, because this is where it starts to get really, really fascinating. Not that it isn't already, but talk about what did the creature look like? The one that you walked up on, and then if you would, for the audience, describe the other two that you saw the best you can from what you remember.
Okay. Well, the baby that was in the tree, it looked like a chubby kid. It's body wise. It looked like a little chubby kid covered in hair. I'd say it was probably it was maybe about 4 foot tall, 3.5, 4 foot tall. But the face looked it looked more human than it did monkey. It had the nose it had a human nose, but it was a lot wider. Not real big, but a little bit wider. And it was a chocolate color, chocolate brownish color, we'll say. And the first female that stepped out, she was probably, like I was saying, she was probably about 6'6", 6'7". I know she had 5 or 6 inches on me. And she was slender. She was a golden color. I guess you would call it blonde, but it not really blonde to me. It looked more gold than anything. And she looked a lot like a Native American. And I was
all three of them had kind of had a human-like appearance from where you
it looked very human, but the big one that stepped out, you could tell she had a little bit of an animal in her.
And when you say that, what do you mean?
Maybe I'm saying that because of the way she growled at me and screamed, but she looked more. She had more of the chimp look to her. But the first one that stepped out, she was beautiful. I mean, not saying her face wise, it's just her standing there. It's something I had never seen before. I mean, this story is. I know this is hard to believe, and I know everybody out there is going to think I'm crazy, but it's the God's honest truth.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated by it. And so all three of them looked more human-like, except for the oldest one looked more, kind of had an animal look. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, had an animal look. And the golden one, the first one that stepped out, I mean, she was slender, but she had muscles. But she had the smaller waist, and she had hips on her. You could tell she was younger, and you could tell she was in her youth, maybe going through, I guess, what we would have as puberty.
Yeah, and then the older one, obviously, you could tell it was an older one.
Oh yeah, you could tell she was older one. You could tell she looked a little rough.
And let me ask you, what's going through your mind at this point? You leave, you go home. And I can hear it in your voice when you and I talked the other night, and I completely get it. You almost kind of, and it's hard for people to understand this, but when you experience something like this, you almost want to go back. You want to see it again. You want to make sure I wasn't delusional the first time I saw this thing. And so I get completely, but what's going through your mind? I mean, what did you think you just saw?
I didn't know. To be honest with you, I had no one I could talk to. I had no internet, and I didn't know what I seen. To be honest with you, I couldn't put it in no category of nothing that I knew. The biggest shock was seeing the baby there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Seeing because it looked like I said, it looked like a little chubby kid hanging in the tree with a bunch of hair on it.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to help it, and I might not have been able. It looked heavy. It was probably just as, it was probably that height, but it was probably just as wide as me. And I'm 6'2", and I weigh probably 215, 220. And when I got home that night, I didn't know what to think. I still was kind of confused. Even after I found out what they were, I was still confused on it because when I seen that the first time I seen that patty type was the first one that I had actually seen, and I'd seen the movie Harry and the Hendersons, but I mean these didn't look nothing like that. They did, but they didn't.
And so you go home and you're obviously this is on your mind. You take some time off work. I want to come back to you being sick. But before we go into that, so what happens next? You decide to go back out there.
Yep. Yeah. I went back. I go back out there and, I go back out there and I'm sitting there on the bank and, trying to collect my thoughts and everything. And, it still had that eerie feeling, but a peaceful feeling. And I was thinking, I'm sitting there thinking, did I have a mental breakdown in my head? What has happened to me? At the time, I was going through a lot of stress at the time with, it's the first time I'd been married. First, it was my second kid, and I ended up having a kid with another woman, and with my wife. But I didn't grow up with that like that. I grew up in a single, both parents in my home, and I was going through a lot of stress at the time, and I thought maybe I had a mental break. But as I get out there, you want me to tell you how I met the lady?
Yeah, if you would.
Okay. So I go back out there and, I collect all my thoughts and everything. And as I'm going to leave, I think this was, I went out there a couple more times after that. And it was probably on my second or third time going back out there. I'm going to leave, and there's this old lady that is standing out there by my motorcycle. No, I left something out, Wes. The first time I went out there, when I walked back to my motorcycle, there were 3 rocks, shiny rocks, sitting on my gas tank. And I still have those to this day. I've made necklaces out of them.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
And they were gifts from the Sasquatch. I always refer to them as animals, but so it was on my second or third time going back out there. I'm going to leave, and there's this old lady standing by my motorcycle, and I'm like, oh man, what? She's probably going to jump on me for being, on this land, which I didn't know who it was, an abandoned rock quarry, but I go out there a lot, and I was like, oh man, here we go. So here's another thing. As I'm walking back to my motorcycle, she was like, excuse me. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to get it from this old lady. And I walk up to her and I'm like, hey, hey, how are you doing? And everything, we said our greetings to each other. And she's like, I want to thank you for helping the baby Haint out. Did you understand that, Haint?
Yeah.
That's what she referred to him as.
That's what she called him. Yeah, Haints.
Called him Haints.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? She was like, you helped the baby Haint out. And, I'm sitting, I didn't know what she was talking about. And when she was saying it to me, I wasn't thinking about my encounter or nothing. I just thought maybe she was a delusional old lady. Then she explained it to me, and I'm sitting there looking at this, and I'm like, this, I guess, I didn't have a mental breakdown. And, I was like, how would you know about this? And she tells me, they told me. And she tells me, I'd seen this, riding this road, I'd seen this old lady out in her yard a few times because I travel the road a lot. And she tells me, she's like, stop up to the house and see me. So, I leave, she goes walking back down. She didn't live that far away from there. She probably lived maybe maybe not even a half mile. And if you cut through the woods, it probably wasn't a quarter of a mile. And she tells me to come out there and see her. So probably about a week later, I go, I'm out on my motorcycle, and I said, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to talk to this lady. And I go to her house, and she's sitting on her front porch, and I get off on the bike, and I walk up and talking to her, and I was like, please explain this to me. I was like, I don't know what I seen. And she tells me that, she was like, I know that you helped the baby out of the tree, which I didn't. I didn't even put no hands on the baby. And she also told me, she was like, I know that, I think she said its name. She was like, I know that she screamed at you. She was like, that's what they do when they're upset. And, I'm asking her, I had like a million things going in my head, but I didn't know what to say to her. She's telling me about, I can't remember what I always talked about, but she ends up inviting me into her house. We go in the house, and we're sitting there at the kitchen table, and she's telling, she gives me a little bit of detail. She had been like communicating with them since the 70s. Also, another thing, when I walked in her house, I mean, it was it was nasty in it. Not nasty, dirty wise, but just a terrible, terrible odor.
What did it smell like when you walked in?
It smelled like a dairy cattle, and it smelled like a wet dog. I never smelled no skunk smell, but I smelled the wet dog, and it smelled like dairy cattle's in there, and they stink.
Just kind of a wild smell. Yeah.
Wild. And also I noticed, she had a few holes in her walls in the house. It's she lives in a really old house. It's a 2-story house out in the country. The house is probably over 100 years old. We go and we sit down in the kitchen, and she's telling me, she had been communicating with them since the 70s. And, they're like her family. And, while we're sitting down there, I hear something upstairs, and, I didn't think nothing about it. I thought maybe, I don't know what I thought about it, to be honest with you. And she's sitting there, and all of a sudden she's sitting in this chair, and she leans her head back and starts making this clacking noise. Well, I heard something coming down the steps, 2 sets of something coming down the steps. And she walks like in the entranceway into the kitchen, and she's standing there, and all of a sudden, peeking out behind her is the baby and another baby, and they're staring at me. I hear them sniffing just constantly like that, and she's talking with them and making hand gestures with them, and they're talking back and forth, and I'm sitting here just blown away.
Was it one of the same one that you saw in the tree? Or were they?
Oh, yeah. It was the same one. Yeah, you can't do. I mean, all the ones that I've seen, all of them look different. All of them have their own look to them. And it was. Sorry about that. I'm still kind of, when I get to thinking about when I first seen all this, it kind of puts me in a kind of a weird place.
No, I understand. And so, what happens next? They're standing behind her, and she always wore these old sundresses, and they both have their hands on her dress and are peeking around at me and sniffing, and she's telling she ends up telling me, she said, "Don't worry, they don't bite too hard." And I thought that was that kind of broke the air in there, and she ends up, she sits back down, and they're sitting there, and they're standing right beside her, and they're like, they have their heads down, but they're kind of looking at me and everything, and we're sitting there, and like she had some muffins sitting on the counter, and they go over there and grab the muffins and are eating them, and it's just like, it was these ladies' grandkids, and I know everybody out there is probably like, he is lying his tail off, but this is the God's honest truth, and I don't know any other way to tell this but the way that I've seen it. She's there. Where was I with the muffins? Yeah, they grabbed the muffins and were eating the muffins. And, she's telling me more about them and everything. I can't remember everything that she tells me. But on that first day I was out there, when I met the babies,
we was all in the kitchen, and all of a sudden there's it's more clicking. It's more like a yell, but with like clicking in it. And the two babies look up, and the woman looks up. They all doing the same kind of head motion. You know, I asked her, I was like, what was that? And she was like, that's Papa. And come to find out, Papa's the alpha. And the two juveniles, she walks into the door and is communicating with them, talking and making I don't know, it sounds like that, but maybe a little bit different. Like if you put your tongue to the top of your throat, or to the top of your mouth, roof of your mouth, and that kind of sound.
Kind of a popping sound. Yeah.
The popping sound, yes. And she walks into the door, and I'm still sitting when you sit in her kitchen, you can see her whole backyard, all her woods, her gardens, her barns, and everything. And I see these two little juveniles take off running out the back. And they were upright running, and I mean, these things are fast. I mean, they went around there, it was like 2 lightning strikes. They were gone.
And so what happens next? I know you went back, and we'll get to that, but I mean, what was the conversation like? Did you ask her, what the hell are these things? What's going on here?
You know, I asked her, I don't know if I put it in that kind of context. What are they? I was like, you know, I asked her, I said, what is going on? And she, you know, like she told me she's been communicating with them since the 70s. And she tells me that, you know, that they help her out around the farm. She tells me that she keeps the babies every second or third night while the grown-ups hunt. And it's like she almost kind of runs like a little daycare there. And she said that she has rooms up there. And she told me she's been doing this with pretty much everyone that's in the troop. And she says once they get a certain age that, you know, they get too big and they can't come in the house. And when I seen what I seen, I understand why. Like the female, she could get in there, but her head would be through the door, through the roof. And
it's interesting because I've heard things like this before in the past. But so do you guys eventually? Does she tell you anymore, or do you eventually just end up leaving?
I sat there talking to her, but you know, it was so much that it was so much information and things to take in at once. Because it was like being put on a different planet. It was something that I didn't know. You know, she tells me, you know, like I said, she was telling me that they help her out around the farm. And the second time I went out there, we went in the backyard, and, you know, she shows me her garden, and she says, you know, this is my side of the garden, and that's that side of the garden. She has a small pond that she keeps stocked with fish for them. And she had a few horses out there, and I think that she was feeding them the horse food, the horse feed food, whatever you call it. Because I mean, there was probably 300 or 400 bags of this feed laying around. Also, another thing I didn't tell you about when we talked the other day, when I looked in her backyard, she has had when you go in the house, there's an extension cord that's running out the back door with cable wire tied all the way around it. And she has a TV sitting out there for them. Oh, yes. Also, this too. I mean, this sounds crazy. I know. I'm sorry, but this is the truth. When I was in there, I noticed a lot of toys. And a lot of the toys were SpongeBob. Well, she has this TV that she kept outside with cable on it. And she says that they all love SpongeBob. And I was out there. It was probably on my third time I went out there. And she had the TV on, and she was like, watch this. And she plugs it in, and she was like, give it just a minute. And I looked out there, and there was you could see their eyeballs everywhere, little sets of eyes everywhere out there. And I thought that was probably one of the neatest things. That was probably one of the most fascinating things I'd seen.
So let me ask you. So you end up leaving. How many times do you go back to this property and talk to this lady?
I probably went out there 5 or 6 times.
Well, tell us about the next time you went out and what she said, or if you saw any other creatures.
Okay, the next time I went out there, you know, we're in the house, And we ended up going out on the front porch, and the first female that I'd seen was there. It came up, and she was outside and communicating with it. And I mean, this is going to sound horrible, I know, but and the thing about it is, I don't want to say the lady's name, but she ends up telling me that this particular animal, Bigfoot, was 8 years old, but she was, 6'6", 6'7", and like I was telling you, she was very, very mature. And while I'm sitting there, I'm looking, I'm staring just like crazy, and I probably might have stared at her breast way too much. And I know everybody can think, "Ooh, that's sick," but it is what it is. And
Yeah.
she gave me a very like mean look and a dirty growl.
Typical woman.
Typical woman. And they say that they can read minds, and I wasn't thinking nothing like that. I hope I wasn't.
Yeah.
If I did, God forgive me. But I mean, she was very attractive. And there's a picture on the internet, and it's old, rare photos of like Native Americans. And if you look through there's a picture of a woman that looks very, very similar to her.
Well, it sounds odd to the audience, and obviously for me it sounds odd because. But having said that, I wasn't there. And Albert Otzman, Albert Otzman, the Canadian
yes, I heard his story. Uh-huh.
And you and I were talking about this the other night. There's a portion of his story where I think there was more that went on there than what he says, because he was very attached to the young female, and he even thought about taking the young female away from there. And it makes you stop and go, well, why? Why was he so infatuated with this young female? So I'm breaking your balls, but I guess I get it to some extent. I understand where you're coming from.
I mean, it's just. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. She was attractive.
No,
that's the only way to put it. And she's. You can't see her lower area because it's very hairy. But I mean, she was very tall and muscular, but she had a shape. And, she had a hairy little butt, I guess I could say. And, she was, I mean, it was fascinating. It was a beautiful specimen is the way I put it.
No, I get it.
You can go to the zoo and see a beautiful lion and it's like, man, that thing is really beautiful.
Yeah, of course. So this thing's actually talking to the old woman. When you were there, this one was, so obviously that's where the old woman knew that you had walked up, meant no harm. Obviously, they were communicating with her. And I want to come back to this because there's something I want to tell you about it, but I don't want to interrupt the story. So go ahead. So she's talking with this one. What happens next?
She's talking with the lady. She's talking with the woman, and the woman is sitting on the stairs, and the Bigfoot was there, and they're communicating, and I'm listening to this, and at the same time I'm staring at her. And that's when she gave me the low growl. I guess I was staring actually too hard. And she's sitting there and she's like, "Give me just a minute," is what she tells me. She walks in the house and comes out with a big thing of muffins and gave to her, and she walked off. And that was the story on it. Second time I went out there.
How were they communicating? Was it the same thing? Clicks and
it was the clicking, the clicking of the mouth. But I think some of them, I don't know. I could have sworn remember I told you the two juveniles when I first went out there and they had left, I could have sworn one of them said bye. And maybe there was something in my head, but I could have swore I heard one of them say bye. But she was communicating with them, and it's a lot of hand gestures when she's talking. She would make a lot of half circles with her hand. You understand what I'm saying? Like she would stick her hand out and make like a half circle. She done that a whole lot. But it wasn't no sign language, but it was well, I don't know sign language, but it didn't look like sign language to me. It was a lot of hand gestures. Yeah, no, I understand. And a lot of clacking. But I say that clacking, but it's a language because each the they were all different. You know what I mean? It's like me sitting here talking to you now. You know, all my words are different. Well, when she was, or, you know, if you're a Latino speaking Spanish, you can tell that they're saying different words. Or a Japanese person talking very fast, you can tell that they're saying different words. It was the same thing, and it was very fast.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and I've heard the clicking and the popping before. And so, do you end up leaving and then coming? I know you went back, what, 5 or 6 times? Is that?
Yeah, I went back 5 or 6 times, and on my next time I went out there is when she showed me the garden, and she shows me her she kind of gives me a small tour of the property, but not real far. And she told me, and like where they, I guess their nest or den or whatever you want to call it, she says they stay back there. And we were out, and when we were out there, you know, I did have that feeling of being watched. And she told me, she's like, they're always there. She's like, they always, you know, she's like, they always watch me, and, you know, they know her really good. She's like, they're always there. There's always one or two of them is always there. And she would never, if a burglar went to her house, I would feel so sorry for them. It'd be the worst mistake in the world.
And so, tell us about the next time you saw them. Tell us about the next time you actually saw the creatures, or if you did see them again. When you went back out.
Okay, on the next time I went out, you know, I've seen the juveniles, the babies, a lot, because there's a big, you know, I heard people saying juveniles and all that stuff, but, you know, the juveniles are big. The juveniles are bigger than we are. I mean, they're way, you know, like I was telling you, the female that I seen, she was only 8 years old, and she was 6'6", and every bit of probably 300 pounds. But I mean, all mother. I don't think there's an ounce of fat on them. The next time, like I was saying, I'd seen the juveniles, and, you know, I was telling you about this. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and there was the 2 juveniles. I guess there was only 2 babies there at the time that I was there, because all I'd seen was 2 babies. And it was always the same 2 up there. And they were sitting in the floor, and I was looking at their feet. And I noticed, you know, they have a padding on their foot, but they also have oh man, I don't know how to say this. It's like they have a break in their foot about halfway down. And it's like, it almost looks like their ankles are in the middle of their foot. And I think as they get older, I'm no expert, but I think as they get older, I think maybe they their feet grow into them, or they grow into their feet because they're so big. And it looks like they're, like, you know, I was looking at the 8-year-old, and, you know, I was looking at her, and, you know, her ankle placement was farther back like ours were.
But the juveniles weren't?
But the juvenile, it's going to sound weird. The story sounds weird. The story sounds strange. The story sounds unbelievable. But, you know, it looked like their ankle was almost in the middle of their foot. And that's the only way that I can explain that.
That's very interesting.
And I remember I was out there one time, and the lady was telling me, she said that I've never really seen them do it, but she said the 2 babies, she said they fight a lot, and they fight over toys a lot. And she did say that they do have a really, really bad temper, but they listen to her. Like when she snapped her fingers, they moved. And, you know, they kind of pouted around like a kid would do. And, you know, I guess they was on good behavior with me there, but she said that they throw temper tantrums. She says that, you know, that they have broke stuff in the house.
Did she ever tell you what they were?
I think she refers to them as she never said what they were. She referred to them as her neighbors. And I think I'm not in the woman's head, but I think she sees them as a people. And I know a lot of people have bad encounters with them. And, you know, I would hate to piss, you know, even the 8-year-old off, because, I mean, she could probably take on 5 men and win. And, where was I at? I got lost in thought.
So you were going back to the property.
Yeah, going back to the property. Yeah, and the babies. Yes, I was telling you about their feet and everything. It was probably like on my 4th time going back out there, you know. I hadn't gotten really close with this lady, but, you know, she talked to me a lot. She liked drinking coffee. And, you know, on that second time I was out there, and when she brought the muffins out there, she said they love peanut brittle. And my mother, she made the best peanut brittle in the world. So I took a very big thing of peanut brittle out there, and she said they were very happy with it. It was probably on the fourth. I probably went out there maybe 5 or 6 times. And it was either the 4th or 5th time I went out there. I was sitting, and it was later on. It had gotten dark on me, and I always told myself I didn't want to be out there at dark because she knows them, I don't. And I was a little, I ain't gonna lie to you, I was a little scared being out there at night. And she's sitting there, and we're sitting there talking, and she just, I can't remember what our conversation was, but she stops and she was like, "I'll be back." And I'm like, "Okay." And she's like, "Papa's here." And this is the first time I've seen the alpha. And she goes outside, and I look out that window, and Wes, it was a beast out there.
What did you see?
I mean, he was so big. I swear he was, at his shoulders, he was 5 foot across. He was humongous. And this lady, she's a picture of your typical old lady. She's probably 5'3", 5'4". She was at his waistline, and that's the God's honest truth. The top of her head was at his waistline. And she was out there talking to him. And, I heard a lot of the clacking and everything, and, I'm looking out the window, and Papa, I guess I will call him, looks in at me, and like I look at him, and I get terrified. And I didn't want to go out there no more, but he was massive. I thought the one that yelled at me was big. She had nothing on him.
Did he look more human-like, or was he more of...
he had it was dark, but it wasn't, there's a, but I guess, I hear him now, the booger lights, what people say, like the lights that, that they have on the barn. And, I can make him out pretty good, like his body features, but he was standing with his back to the light. I couldn't make out, actually, I could make out his facial features, but I couldn't couldn't describe him in detail to you. But he looked like an old man a little bit in his face, is what I think. His nose was really big, and his mouth was ungodly big. I mean, he had the biggest, that's one thing I remember about him is his mouth was being really, really big. And all of them have really, really, like, thin lips. They almost look like they have no lips.
And so you see this thing, and so what happens next?
Well, I'm sitting there staring out the window, and she stays out there for like 10 or 15 minutes, and I have no idea what they were talking about, but they were communicating. She comes back in and just picks up our conversation like nothing in the world happened. And I'm like, I said, "That's Papa." I was like, I told her, I was like, "He is humongous." She was like, "Oh, he's a teddy bear." She referred to him as a teddy bear. I mean, I'd hate to run in a dark, in a lighted alley. I would hate to run into that.
Yeah.
I mean, his arms, I swear, his arms were as big as my head, and that's no lie. And his shoulders and his I guess it's the trapezoid muscles that go up to the neck. I mean, just unreal. And he, another thing different about him is that I noticed compared to the females and the babies, they had a little bit of a neck. He really didn't have a neck. Like his neck, like when I seen him in the light, when I first looked at him, all I seen was those big trapezoid muscles and like a little hump on top.
And so,
his head.
And so does he eventually leave? I mean, does he eventually turn and just kind of, I know you said...
Oh, yeah. She would sit out there and talk to him, and, they done their clacking, and, he takes off walking, and she comes back in the house like nothing had ever happened. But, she's been dealing with them since the 70s. Oh, and she also told me that pretty much all of them that's out there, she had not really raised, but she looked after pretty much all of them. She's been looking after the babies since the 70s. And I say more than likely, Papa was probably one of her, one of the babies that was in there at one time.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. And so before you talk about why you never came back, did she tell you any more information about them, or Anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, she said, I remember her telling me about when they go hunting. She said that they go an unbelievable amount of distance and come back all within the same night. She told me that she believes that they were hunting as far as up to the Ohio River. And that's probably from there, as you know, in a straight line as the crow flies, as everybody says, it's probably 40 or 50 miles. She said she believes that they, you know, go as far as that. And she says that they'll bring her meat. She stocks the pond, and you know, she stocks the pond for them. And I asked her, I said, I remember I asked her, I said, do they have fishing poles? And she's like, no, they get right in the water and catch them. And that's, you know, that's pretty awesome. Because, I mean, to catch a fish is really, really, I've tried that as a kid. And she said that they were really good swimmers.
And she mentioned something about the star people. Tell me about that.
Yeah. That was the same night. That was the same night. She told me once the males get like, I guess to a certain age or something, that they have to leave and go with the star people. And I never, ever knew what that meant. I don't know if it's a UFO thing. I don't know. The story's crazy enough as it is. But going into UFOs even makes it even crazier.
No, I hear you.
But, you know, she tells me that once the males get to a certain age that they have to go with the star people for a little while. And she never gave me that was pretty much what she told me. She never gave me no details on what it meant, or she never explained it to me.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'll come back to that. But did she say anything else? Did she give you any more information about them or what they do or why they do what they do?
No, you know, the only thing that she pretty much told me in details about is, you know, that she had been dealing with them since the 70s, and that, you know, she said pretty much every day that the babies are at her house. Every time I went there, the babies were always there. And when I was out there one time, when we was out there, it was on the second time I went out there, she was showing, no, it was on the third time I went out there. I had walked out to the barn and I was looking at she has those big silos. She has 4 big silos on her land. And I was looking, you know, at all the feed that was out there and everything in the barn. And I seen some figures, you know, I could tell, you know, what she said, they're always around. And I could tell, plus I felt that feeling like they were watching me. But I knew something was out there, but I never seen it. And she told me at the time, she said that there was, I think, 16 or 17 of them that was in the troop.
It's fascinating, and there's things I want to talk to you about. But before we get into that, what made you stop going out to this woman's property? I know you're you're getting access a lot of people don't get, but what made you stop?
Just when I seen, you know, Papa, it scared me because he could probably flick me and kill me. He could, that's no lie. I mean, his hands were, his hand, I can't even describe how big they are. You'd have to see it to believe it. He could probably grab a basketball and squeeze it with 2 fingers and probably bust it.
So it was mainly seeing the size of this thing is what
seeing the sight of him.
And I kind of actually get that. I mean, in my own encounter, I hate to go back to my own encounter, but I kind of get what you're saying. I mean, it's hard for people to understand when you see something 3-4 times your size standing upright like a man. It does run it does strike some fear in you. And if it doesn't strike some fear in you, you got some major issues you need to work out because the size of them does, you know, and I get what you're saying. So you stopped you stopped going out there. That was the last time.
Yeah. I went out there one more time after that. And that was pretty much the last time I went. Cause you know, when I went home that night, it was just like seeing him it was fascinating seeing him, but at the same time, it was like a nightmare seeing him. And, you know, I never had any nightmares at all about through this whole thing. I never had no nightmares about him at all.
To be honest with you, I think it's really fascinating, Anthony. And the reason why I say that is because I've heard this about 4 or 5 times off the air, as you and I said the other night. And, one of the ladies, and it makes you wonder sometimes, well, is this just a lonely old woman that's saying a story to, I don't know. But I can tell you through her encounter, along with your encounter, there's little bits of truth to what, and I'm not, please don't take this the wrong way. There's items, what you talk about, that is very, I've heard before. It's real details. The clicking, the popping, how they talk back and forth using hand gestures. I just talked about this on Friday night show with a guy who came over a hill and he saw military guys talking to a Sasquatch. He didn't want to come on the show, didn't want to discuss it, as far as being public. But he went into full details with me about what he saw. And it really bothered him, but he said it appeared that they were talking to each other. And I wasn't really sure what to think about that. I really wasn't sure what to make of that.
I believe him.
Well, and then the lady I was telling you about that
contacted
me, she had named them like pets, like dogs. She had named all of them.
She had names for all of them. And the thing about it was their real names. It wasn't a name she had gave them. It was a name that just like you're Wes and I'm Anthony.
Yeah, and that's kind of what this lady did. I mean, and what was interesting is she talked about this little one on her property, and not that they dropped him off at the house, but they would drop him off near the barn, and it was always the little ones. And she said that there's a little one on her property, and actually an investigator went out there, but there's a little one on her property, and he had a white stripe on his chest. And one of the investigators had actually seen this creature, and the creature was about 6'7", almost 7 feet tall. And she was telling them, oh, he's only about 8, maybe 9 years old. He was very small. He has that white stripe on his chest. I mean, I don't know what to think about that. You know what I mean? It's like
what you just said is how that lady talked. She talked about him like just like people. Like she was saying. He's a little one, and that's the way she referred to him as she referred to him as people.
Yeah, and that's what this older woman, she gets very upset with me when I say animals or creatures, and I'm sure I'll get an email from her after this show. But she she doesn't like when I call them animals and creatures because she says they're a form of people. But she feeds them, and she could tell you all sorts of things. Like we were talking about with the swimming. She's like, they're excellent swimmers. They can hold their breath for a long time. She has a lake right next to her home. She told me all sorts of things about them.
Where's this lady from?
She's actually in Alabama.
Huh.
And
that sounds a lot like what I'm telling you.
And that's why I was so happy to have you come on the show, because she wouldn't come on the show. But I've heard this about 4 or 5 times before off the air, and rarely do you ever get those people to come on the air and talk about it because it sounds so crazy to everyone listening. I'm sure I'll get 100 hateful emails after this show, but no one else was there but you, and so you know what happened, and I wasn't there, and so do I think all these things are evil monsters that'll rip you from limb to limb? No, I don't believe that. I think most of the time the encounters, they don't want to interact with you. There's a lack of trust, and there should be a lack of trust, and then you hear stuff like this, and where this old woman seems to be taking care of him for many years, and I can kind of see something like this happening. You know what I mean? I really can see something like this happening.
Well, I don't think they trusted me because they didn't. I was there, but I felt like the redheaded stepchild,
like a third wheel. Yeah,
I felt like a third wheel. Not so much with the babies, but the babies never really interacted with me. And I would try to make faces at them and try to just do stuff like you would do with a kid. And it was just like every time I do it, they would always put their heads down, and they would like look at me, but like put their heads down and like kind of raise their head up, look at me out of the corner of their eye.
Stink eye. Yeah,
get the stink eye. And I guess as they get older, things change, just like with humans. But the babies, they had the prettiest hazel eyes. Their eyes were absolutely beautiful. But as they got older, like all, the two females that I seen, their eyes were black, and the two babies were both males. And maybe when they get older, maybe their eyes will stay the same color. But that's something I kind of hypothesized.
I'm really interested about the star people thing because you do hear a lot of strange reports of them around UFOs, and not always. I mean, it's not like every report's like that, but you do get the very odd reports from time to time. I wanted to ask you, was there anything else she told you about them? Did she give you a history on her property and how these things came on? And did she talk about any of that?
No, but in the little town that I was living in at the time, small towns, big talk. I remember hearing from, just people talking. I remember hearing people saying that the lady was crazy. Like, 'cause, she was an older lady, and, she came to town and would get gas, and she would go to, it's called Southern States. It's like I don't know if y'all have them out there or not.
Like a gas station or?
Do y'all have a Tractor Supply out there?
No.
A TSC? It's like it's like a farm store. You can buy gates, you can buy feed, you can buy clothes, but like Carhartt. It's a farmer store. It's like a farmer's Walmart is what it is.
I got you. Yeah.
And I remember people, making people making fun of her, you know what I mean? Because, they said she was crazy and all this stuff. And like when she came up talking to me, I already knew who she was. And I was like, that's why I was tripping out. I was like, what does this lady want? Because like she doesn't hardly talk to anybody. And, she kind of stays to herself. But, I understand why now. But she drove a little red 4-door Chevette. And if I'm saying that, and everybody's probably, there's people in this town that are like, oh, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, no, it's, I know the lady I talked to, who talked about the white stripe being on the small one, and it's kind of similar, except for hers, I think, started in the 50s or 60s, and her husband passed away, and they knew that they were on the property. They just never really got close with them. She started feeding them, and then all of a sudden they started, rolling up, and she was naming them. And so it's interesting, when you get into situations like this. Is she still alive today? Do you know?
I'm not for sure, but you saying that about that lady's husband dying. That lady told me that her husband died in the 70s. And I never put that together to just now. But she told me that, and I never, she was out there by herself, obviously not by herself, but she was out there by herself. And I remember her telling me that, her husband had passed away in the 70s. If I could go back now and, some of the stuff I know now, I would probably she probably would kick me out of there because I would have a million questions for her. And, even if I did know what I know today, I probably would have never, even though things have changed, I wouldn't take no camera out there. I wouldn't videotape it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't destroy their world just to prove a point to a world that don't give a shit about them. And I hate to say it about that.
No, I understand what you mean. I understand.
Somebody that, want to make a profit. Oh, and another thing that she was telling me about, and I heard on other stations, it was about the braiding of the horse's hair. And I had heard on another Bigfoot show that they do that when they are molesting the animals. The way this lady had this relationship with the animals, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, I don't know what's politically correct, but she told me that her horse's hair, that they braid their hair, and I don't think it was nothing like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know that it's molesting every time. The lady I was telling you about with the younger one with the white stripe, she talked about that to me, and that was way before Melba Ketchum or anyone was, really they were talking about it, or the Outlaws. I know what you're referring to.
That's where I heard it from.
Yeah, and she told me the same thing, that they braid their hair. It's not pretty, but it's kind of a half-assed braiding of horse's hair. And, I don't know if there's a humanity in these things. I mean, I think the audience pretty much knows I hate these things. And deep down, I think I'm not, I'll put it to you like this. I haven't had the experience with them like you have. My experience was very different, and it was not a friendly experience. And so for me, a show like this is difficult because I really think they're nothing more than, well, I don't even want to say that, but it's so hard to hear stuff like this, but I've heard it before. It's not just you, Anthony. This isn't just some crazy story you're telling me that I've never heard before. I've heard this before. And I was laughing when you and I were talking the other night because you're like, well, you're not going to believe any of this because it's too crazy. And if I wasn't there, I wouldn't believe it. If someone told me this, I would think they were a liar too. And that's why I was laughing with you. I was like, well, try me. Trust me, I've heard some strange things. I mean, if you can top it, I'll send you out a sweatshirt or something because I've heard strange.
West, but if I'd have been down there when I first ran into him and that baby was stuck in the tree, I think if Papa would have been there, I don't think I would be here right now.
Yeah, you might be right.
And I hate to say this I'm going to say it because you're very open-minded. The reason I didn't go back, I got a bad feeling off of him. And I don't know why. I mean, I don't know. I got a very bad feeling off of him. And
like a menacing feeling?
Like the vibe was very bad. Like,
oh, I gotcha.
I felt it, the God's honest truth, I felt it before he got there. And the whole story sounds crazy, but I mean, before he got there, there was a gloomy feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
it was a gloomy feeling. And, when she said, the two juveniles, they was in the floor playing. And when she was like, I'm going to go out, she's like, I got to go outside. And, I looked out there and it's just like, they were in the floor playing. But when when he was there, they went upstairs. And I was just like, I got a bad feeling from it. And after seeing him, it's just, it kind of ruined it for me. It was something, I felt like I was the only person in the world that was going through this, you know what I mean? I'm sitting there thinking, how people say that, they see a Bigfoot here, and when I heard the story, I was thinking there was just one Bigfoot that was traveling all across America. And my happy black ass gets to see the four of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, damn, it was so different. And it was like, I told nobody in the world, my grandfather, the only one that knew about it. And he was an old, mean old man. And I know he wouldn't say nothing to nobody about it. And, I felt special being out there, that I was being a part of this and, seeing the babies playing and everything is just, they were probably 4 foot tall, but they were probably like a 1-year-old, you know what I mean? As far as, they could communicate and everything, but you could tell they wasn't too bright, you know what I mean? They were kids, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And you hear a lot of reports of them, like you said, with the clicking and the clacking, the mouth pops, that sort of thing. I mean, I had a guy on a couple weeks back, and him and his cousin were attacked by one. He was originally on Cryptid Brothers. Lance over there does a great job, by the way. But he was originally on their show, and he came on, he was talking about it, and he was talking about this mouth popping, this clicking that it was doing. And I didn't think it was...
The guy from Ohio?
Yeah, the guy from Ohio. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling him, I don't think that mouth popping and clicking was meant for you. I think it was probably trying to communicate with another one. But you hear a lot of this stuff throughout this, and again, I've heard stuff like this before, and I've always been kind of, should I air this? Should I not air this? And I'm at the point now where I'll pretty much air anything. But I'm so glad that you came forward because so many, well, I didn't mean it like that, but you know what I mean?
That sounds like a real... What I'm laughing about is when that you said that is like when you said, hey, you want to do an interview on the show? I mean, that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, no.
It was like when I seen the baby, because I was like, he's going to think I'm crazy.
No.
He's going to have my number traced, and I'll be in the mental hospital in the morning.
No. I didn't think that at all. And I'm so glad that you came forward because there's situations like this before to where I thought, God, if I get this person on the air and share this, there's a lot of information here. I mean, there's a boatload of information here. But most of those people don't. 9 times out of 10, those people don't want to come on the show. So I'm really glad that you came on. I wanted to ask you, what do you think that these things are, Anthony? What's your honest opinion?
My honest opinion, like I say, I refer to them as animals. And maybe I refer to them as animals because maybe I didn't get to know them the way this lady did. But if I was out and I would say I was hunting or something and I seen this, I would think it was an animal. I don't think it's anything that is has special powers, the mind speak, and all that stuff. To me, that they're an animal, but I think there's a little bit more to them. I think they're, we're animals, and I think that they're maybe as far as intelligent wise, and I think maybe they're 2 steps behind humans. I think they're way above, like an orangutan's supposed to be the smartest ape, gorilla, whatever you want to call it. They're supposed to be the smartest. I think they're way smarter than that. I think they're smarter than probably some of the people, but like she says, they have bad tempers. They live in the woods and they don't wear clothes. I see them as animals. That I know it's probably going to piss a lot of people off, but I see them as animals.
Very odd animals, though.
Very odd animals, and they can be killed. One of the babies had, I don't know what it did, but she put a Band-Aid on it. Had a cut on its face, and his blood was just as red as mine and yours. So
it was hurt. It was hurt, even though it was a small injury.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how. It was a pretty good gash on his face, and she put some Neosporin on it. She cleaned it. She sprayed peroxide on it, put some Neosporin on it, threw a Band-Aid on it, and kissed it on his cheek and patted it on its butt and said, "Go play."
Yeah, I'd really love to find out if this woman is still alive.
And I told you the other night. I said when we talked, I said I'm gonna ride out there. I chickened out.
I'd love for you to go back out there. I don't want you to give me any information over the phone as far as the address and everything, but I'd like for you to go back out there and see if, if it's still going on, if she's still around. I know this happened, over 20 years ago, right?
14. It happened in 2004.
2004. So yeah,
14 years ago.
I wonder if she's still alive and if this is still going on.
Yeah, I know. I looked on Google Maps. The house is still there. The silos are still there. The woods are still there. It sounds crazy, but I'm gonna go back and you can see a lot of stuff on Google Maps.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna try to pinpoint the area down like where she pointed the den out to me. And you never know, you might see something. I don't know if y'all have ever tried anything like that. You know what I mean? I know you get a lot of reports on where they are, but you can go on Google Maps and you can look down pretty far on the earth.
Yeah, you can. The interesting part is a lot of times in situations like these, and again, I've dealt with very few, but the few I've dealt with, they're not looking to prove it to anyone. They don't want researchers out running around on their property, which I don't blame them.
I don't blame them either.
And they're not looking to really prove it. It's a different mindset, I guess, for a listener listening, as opposed to someone in the situation. You're talking apples and oranges. From a listener, you would think, well, take pictures. Let's go out and get video of them. Let's do this. Let's do that.
No.
And the people on the property, they have a different mindset, I've noticed, when I've talked to them, because you're welcome to come out. Like the old woman I was talking about, she's like, you're welcome to come out, Wes. If you want, I got an extra bedroom. You can come out and crash. You can come out and see them all you want. I don't want my address. I don't want this showing up on the internet, having either the government come out and squash it or having Bigfoot researchers come out and squash it. And it's a weird position to be in. It's a very frustrating position to be in, because it would be nice to prove it. It'd be nice if you took out the video camera and started videotaping them. I'm sure they would squash it in 2 seconds, so if she did that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to lie to you. I wish I had a picture of the 2 babies. I seen them, and it's just like, they were so cute, and so, they were chubby, and, they were just full of energy. And, they would sit there, they was be on the floor. And a lot of the times, I don't know if it was like a game that they play with each other, but they would be sitting on their butts with their legs out in front of them, kind of spread a little bit, and they would have their hands back bracing themselves, and they would always be pushing each other. It's like they constantly did that. And I don't know, you know, maybe kids do that, but it was fascinating watching them play and watching them, you know, communicate. And you know, it's like the first time I'd seen them, and the first time she laid her head back and done that clacking, I was like, what is she doing? And then, you know, she walks through that doorway, and, you know, she turns around, and I see a little head peek out behind her. Well, on the other side, another little head peeks out behind her. And, you know, I was like, man, I just want to pick one of these things up and just squeeze it. Because it was cute.
Yeah.
And that sounds crazy, but, you know, it was like they were like little teddy bears.
And I've heard that from other people, too. You know, when they're really young, they look like a bunch of little kids. Really, for lack of a better term.
They look like kids. They look so much. I mean, you could tell, like their what do they call it? The above the brow line. You know, like where their eyebrows are. It did protrude a little bit, but not bad. You know what I mean? Not real bad. And they kind of look. You know, they looked a little bit like a chimpanzee, but you know, they were cute and they were chubby and. You know, I'd hate to make one of them. I'd hate to have one of them really angry at you, even being that small, because I'd say one of them was probably way stronger than I could have ever thought about being.
Yeah, and I've heard that. You know, like when they're younger, they have a different look to them, and then when they get older, they tend to get more ugly, more terrifying looking, as they kind of grow into their features. You know what I mean?
Well, if they end up looking like Papa, I feel sorry for him because he was scary looking. And you know, when they went running out of that house, and I was sitting there, and I was standing at that window, and they went around there. They were moving. Moving. I mean, they could probably outrun an Olympic runner. I mean, they were fast, and they were right beside each other.
Yeah, it's a fascinating account. You know, like I said, I think you got a look at these things most people would want. You know, I think most encounters, you know, they're fleeting glimpses. They are accidental type encounters. But you do hear these reports where people have them on their property and they do feed them. And they do. There's a lady here in Washington State I was telling you about, and her husband's a pilot for a major airline. I won't say which one, but. And they claim to have them on their property, and he told me all sorts of things about them. What they ended up doing was feeding them down on a picnic table a little bit farther away from the home. But they quit coming up to the home. They kind of quit. You know, she goes out there and feeds them every night. She says they come out on the picnic table, they'll eat, and then they go back into the woods. And it sounds unbelievable to people listening, but, you know, your encounter, much like this encounter, there's a lot of little details that are real, that are absolutely real details.
Well, you know, she said that she said when she showed me that garden, she said, this is my side of the garden, that's theirs. She told me that they feed her horses, you know, put the feed out in the little, the trough. I don't know if you call them troughs, but in the horse feeding thing, I'm not big up on the farming words, but you know, she said that they put the feed out for her because she's old and these bags are heavy. She said they put the feed out for her. The wood. I don't know if they chop the wood, but you know, they bring her wood. They stack it up. You know, she had a big pile of wood on the side of her house. All the feed that was in the barn was, you know, it was stacked up. It wasn't what you call a perfect stack, but it was all stacked up. And, you know, she says, you know, she stocks the pond. And, you know, she says that when they hunt, that they, you know, they'll bring her meat. She had country hams hanging up in the barn. She had it was a whole roll. It was probably 10 or 15 country hams. I know this old lady wasn't going to eat that much ham unless she sold it. You know, there's a lot of people that do that here. But, you know, I think it was for them. And it's just like, to me, she had they were her family. And I'd say, you know, if somebody came out there messing with them, she probably wouldn't take it too kindly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, I've had other people on. I mean, I had a guy on one time He talked about his mom having these things around his property. And it was fascinating because he had mentioned the gathering of wood. He said they were out trying to get firewood. They're very poor, didn't have any other way to heat the home, so they were out getting firewood. And they heard one of these creatures. They ended up going back. Next morning, they get up, and there's a stack of firewood. That would have taken 3 or 4 grown men to gather and collect and bring. And it was sitting outside the home, and for the longest time, no one could figure out who brought all that wood, where did it come from. And so, even some of that stuff, people might listen to that and go, oh, come on, these things are, basically caretakers of the property. They're doing this and that. But you hear some of this stuff in other accounts, and you don't really know what to make of it. You know what I mean? And if
that's what they were caretakers for her. They took care of the property more than she did, and that's I mean, you could if you was in my situation, you seen it. You could tell this old lady couldn't stack all this up in here. There's no way in hell she could.
Yeah,
I'd have trouble doing all that.
I hear you. Well, it's a fascinating account, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share it, Anthony. I know you didn't really want to come on the show, and I know I begged and pleaded with you to come on the show and share it, but I'm really glad that you did. It's another piece to the puzzle. You know what I mean?
I mean, you have no idea how good this feels to get this off my chest. I told my girlfriend about it, and I'm sure she believes me. But it feels good to talk with somebody that's also. You're the first person I've got to talk to that's also had an encounter. You know what I mean? So you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I thought it was fascinating. I was so glad that you shared it because rarely these encounters are hard to get. Like I said, and I know it sounds like I'm complaining and moaning, and I guess I am, but these type of encounters, it's really hard to get people to come on and talk about it because it sounds so crazy, and that's the part that I love, especially when I was talking with you, Anthony. And I kept telling you, just relax. It's, I'm just listening. And I know you were thinking, God, Wes must think I'm nuts. But as we're talking, what cracked me up is throughout the whole conversation, you're like, you're not going to believe this, but this is what happened. And this sounds unbelievable. Yeah,
but I was so happy when you called because I hear your voice every day. I probably hear your voice more than I do my girlfriend's. I mean, I fall asleep with the headphones in my ear. When I first started, I don't even know what made me even, start thinking about this again because it had been so long. And this has just started going on since like maybe October or November of last year. So, past 5 or 6 months, I didn't know other people had encounters with them. I'd never even heard nothing. And I was just on YouTube one day and it said something Bigfoot and I got on it and then I found your show and it's been nice.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And to all the people out there that don't believe me, I mean, I don't blame you. But all I can do is say what I know. Absolutely.
Thank you again, Anthony. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.